Thank you, Laylord, for the introduction. I think I've been very familiar with the rest of the attendees for this morning session. I've been doing the welcome remarks for the last several virtual sessions. And I want to say good morning. Good morning to you all. Good morning and happy Thanksgiving to those who have offices in the Americas. So it's a sunny day today. I'm working from home. I'm delivering this welcome note from the comfort of my home. So I hope you are also, comfortable where you are now attending this session. Thank you for making time. This will be our last virtual session for the year. So it's almost December. It's almost Christmas. So I wanted the last virtual session to be very insightful for my team and yours, in such that I wanted to help you in your plans for 2021. As our respective organization have started doing the planning for 2021, or maybe at its best, some of you have already done. So it's a matter of you done presenting to your individual senior leadership team. So briefly, and I don't wanna take a lot of time from our resource speaker. I wanted to impart 3 things for this virtual session. So please indulge me. 1, if you are, as the video earlier was, showing us, if you are looking at ways to migrate to the cloud, you're in the right session. You're in the right session. We'll give you a means to assess overall effect from calculated cost and risk until you are able to arrive at an informed decision. Now, if you decide to migrate to Azure, Field Data and our partner, I'm gonna, introduce them later. Field Data and our partner will help you in the migration process. So there's a process in the Microsoft practice that will navigate you and take you into migrating to Azure. We will be working with you when you decide to move to the cloud on a turnkey basis, every step of the way. Or we can reinforce your own individual team and get you prepared for your cloud migration. So either way, Field Data is going to be with you in this, path or journey to the cloud. Now, I understand there are probably some of you in this session who are already using Azure. Thank you very much. You've been, you've been a partner of Field Data. We hope I really hope we've been giving you the service that you need to help you optimize it. So if you are in Azure already, then this session is for you too. We can take you to some optimization notes on how you can, optimize your cost and investment in Azure. I really would want everybody in this session to have a key takeaway that after the session, we can be part of your plan as we navigate 2021. Most of us are going to be back at work in 2021. So with that, this morning, I'm very pleased to announce that I have invited some resources from our friends in Malaysia. So my partner in the delivery of this service is called Rhipe, and they are a regional partner of Microsoft. I've invited them this morning so that they can impart the practice that they have in Malaysia and how successful they are in migrating to Azure Cloud. So without further ado, I turn back to Laylord. Good morning, everyone, and let's be in the session together. Let's learn how we can work together, migrate to Azure. Thank you.
So what I'm going to be talking about today is on the field data assessment. And along with me will be Melvin, who will be assisting me in answering some of the Q&As that you guys will have. So this tool is a very powerful tool. And I would actually recommend you guys to actually try to leverage on this tool. So this will be mainly on about a migration for on-premise to Azure migrations. So I'm very happy today to be able to share this. Let's get started, shall we? All right. So first of all, mainly we'll talk about the Azure to Azure and as well as on-premise to Azure's plan. So normally before we do go through any migrations, we would need to form out of a migration plan to see whether if the things that you have in your environment is okay to go, whether if things are all right. So let me show you a little bit of both. So for Azure to Azure, we will have 7 steps that we have in our plan. So for the first one, normally what we would do is that when you guys would want to have a project to move to Azure from another subscription or your Azure site, what we would do is that we would create a project from our end and we would request you guys to actually grant us the contributor access. Then from there, we will need you to share with us the domain name, tenant ID, subscription ID, and those kind of information to us so that we can actually move on to step 2, which is to do the assessment on our site for your end. So how long we would normally take is approximately 1 week to actually go through the assessment for you guys, depending on how much resource you guys have. So because some of the resources can't be migrated without any interruptions, such as a public IP without SKUs, load balancer with standard SKUs and stuff like that. So those kind of resources cannot be moved, and we would need to reconfigure those kind of resources before we actually put everything into a report where you can see and then get it migrated as well. So once the assessment is done, we would go through the planning phase with you guys, where we will get the acknowledgement form and actually get you guys to sign in, whether if the whole report on the assessment is all right or not, whether if there's any resource that needs to be looked at and reconfigured before we start scheduling on the migration date. So we will have approximately 2 discussions. One is on the resources that you have, and another to have a migration date to be set out. Once that is done, we would actually start to move on the migration process. Like I said, the more resources you have, the longer time it will take for us to actually do the migration, because there might be a little bit of a downtime for you guys. So moving on, once the migration is complete by the migration team, we would get the acknowledgement letter back of whether if the whole resources is actually migrated, and you guys are having any issues with the migrations, whether if anything is a problem in your side, then once there's nothing, we will just sign off the acknowledgement form. So just like Azure to Azure, on-premise to Azure, we would also have 7 steps as well. So it is quite similar, but these steps requires a appliance. So appliance setup, I mean by the Azure tool that we will be using to actually install on your on-site or maybe remotely. So similar to the Azure to Azure plan, what we have planned for the on-premise to Azure is that we will need a timeline, because the whole process would take slightly longer compared to the Azure to Azure migrations. And From there, we would actually help you to set up the appliance setup and do any server configurations. It would take some time on this part. It would take roughly around 2 weeks, I guess. And once that is done, the appliance would be very simple to use already. The appliance would mainly do the discovery on its own, and you have the assessment report ready, you have the dependency report ready on what is the VMs and virtual machines that servers that you guys actually have. You have a full view on those stuff. So once you have the report, we will start with the migration planning, which is to check and see whether if there's any interruptions. We can go through a test migration run, whether if everything is all right, and then we'll start with the migration process. So once after migrating, then we will need to let the partner double check everything, let the partner sign off to have their acknowledgement of the migration that is fully migrated. And yeah, that would be the whole plan for on-premise to Azure. So what is this tool that's been very popular and very powerful? So let me share with you on this tool. So this is actually on-premise migration, as well as shorten the whole workload process. So how this tool helps us is that it drives more compute efficiency, the flexibility to right size your infrastructure on demand, and can also save costs in the long run for your environment. So how does it actually save costs? It will give you a full view on your storage costs, your virtual machines costs, and it will actually provide you a recommendation, something like the advisor. So it has multiple things that's included in this tool, which gives you a more simplified process to actually take a look at. And you can actually look at it via a centralized hub where you can see all your stuff. So this tool, Microsoft has also added both of their own as well as partner tools for on-premise to Azure migration and assessment that you can check centrally in Azure. So let me share with you the scenarios that we actually have using this tool. So there are actually a few more scenarios, but like what I have here is the servers, which is things like on-premise VMwares, Hyper-Vs, Hyper-V VMs, physical servers. And second there, you have databases, which is your on-prem SQL databases. And third, web apps, which is like your web apps, your applications to Azure PaaS or Azure App Services. And last but not least, which is the data box, which is normally a migration on a large amount of data to Azure. So what I'll be showing you today would be mainly on the server side, the very basic functions where it will be similar to the rest, but depending on which environment you guys are trying to migrate to, it will have a different process or setup. So let me share with you on the Azure Migrate to process. So this process, you will have 7 processes that you will need to go through when you use the Azure Migrate. So for number one, prerequisites will need to be in place, and for both environment will have to have the right permissions needed. So moving on to number 2, set up on Azure Migrate project, including the tools you will want to use once you've selected the tool. There will be multiple tools for you to choose, and depending which tool you're more familiar with, you can actually choose the tool and it will have a guided instructions there for you to actually set up. So for today, I'll be showing you the most basic functions, basic tool that Microsoft has provided, which is the Azure Migrate for both assessment and migrate. So moving on to the third step, we will then use the appliance to do the assessment and migration for the environment that you would want. Then from there, we will be able to review on the Azure Migrate assessment and the dependency as well as the scope of the targeted migration where you want to migrate to. So once the assessment is done, we will move on to the migration portion, which replicates the virtual machine to a IaaS. And then once we have done with the replication and the test migrations, we can finalize and actually switch your virtual machines into a production, and it can start running already. All right, so moving on, let me share with you the tools that that's currently available for Azure Migrate tool. So here you'll see Cloudamize, Unified Cloud, D42, Movir, Quarantech, and as well as Azure Migrate's Microsoft's own tool. So all these tools, you can use it to do that is available from the Azure Migrate. You can select which one you want to use it for your assessment as well as your migrations. But take note that both sides, you will need at least one tool to actually be selected to use it. So today, what I'll be showing you is the basic default that Microsoft has provided. But if you're familiar with other tools like Movir or Cloudamize, feel free to do so, because inside as well, we'll have the guided instructions on how you can actually set it up and start running it on Azure. So in the Azure Migration Appliance, what will be done is that, one, once you deploy the Azure Migrate Appliance in the on-prem data center, the appliance will start collecting all the informations. And once the appliance is up and running, you will be able to discover and analyze all the data in your on-premise data center, whether it's Windows or Linux, depending on what you have on your on-premise center. And then that info will help you to do the assessment on what you have before you migrate to Azure, whether if it's the sizing is correct, whether if you still want to modernize your infrastructure, whether if you want to utilize your cost and do more cost planning. So you can actually do a lot more planning from this point on before you do any migration, because you have Azure Migrate will be able to generate you those informations, and you can actually tweak and play around with it on what type of cost and you would want to utilize on, and the compute sizing. So once everything is done from your end, everything is fully utilized, you have the recommended stuff, you can actually start with a test migration before fully running it, complete migration all over to the production area. So that's it. Let me run through you the step-by-step process for the Azure Migrate setup. So this setup, it actually gives you a more centralized view. So here we go. So here you see the Azure portal. Let's say for those of you who's already familiar with Azure portal, you can see below on the bottom left, there will be Azure Migration tool. I'm not too sure whether if you guys have used it or not, but do bear with me on this slide. You can click on those links, or you can go on top of the search bar and you can actually type in Azure Migration tool, and you'll be able to get the same link as well. Where it would direct you would be here. So here you'll be given 3 options. So depending on what scenarios you guys are actually migrating on-premise to Azure, you would have to choose carefully and not select the wrong one, because if you select the wrong one, you will not be able to perform that migrations. So for me, I would be doing on servers, and which is the first options. So I'll be clicking into that. And what it would bring you to is a place where you can add your tool and start a wizard-based process to help you select the assessment and migration tool. So from here, after clicking on Add Tool, this time it will help you select, give you a very vague option on the tools that you want to use. And you would first need to fill in on the subscription that you guys are actually on, the resource group that you guys would want to run it to, Migrate project, which is the name that you want to have for this project, as well as your geography. So pretty standard stuff here. Moving on the second tab, you would be able to see the options given to you on the tools that you would like to use. So from my end, I have selected the Azure Migrate tool for the assessment. And on the third tab for the migration tool, I have also selected Azure Migrate, which is from Microsoft themselves. So once you've selected the options, you completed everything, how it would look like for you guys is that it would look roughly something like this, which one, you have an assessment tool on the left side, and then another migration tool on the right side. So there are a few features that you can see in here. For the assessment tool, you can discover the servers that you have on premises, and you can access those servers, and it can provide you an overview of what those servers that has been accessed is actually utilizing on. Then for the migration tools, you have 4 features as well. Whatever that has been accessed on your assessment portion, it would be automatically brought to the migration tool, and you would have information on the that you have. And from there, you can replicate your items to the VMs, and you can start doing a test run on those servers before you migrate them. So before I run more in depth on how the tools actually work, let me give you a brief details on the environments that you guys would actually be running on and the requirements of it. So right here we have a VMware environment. Say if you are actually looking to move a VMware environment, here are the requirements that you would need to have at least. If not, it will not be working. So once you have the tool installed, you would actually need to install the appliance, meaning the OVA file that you would need to download for the appliance to have it set up. So the supported things are, it must first be an on-premise VMware VM. Secondly, all the Windows and Linux server must share at least the same one credential, so that it will be easier for you guys to actually go through the whole migration process and will not lose track of it. Then moving on, we would have the machine limit for discovery. So one appliance, we can actually discover up to 35,000 servers per project. So I'm pretty sure you guys won't be running more than 35,000, but the limit is actually more than enough for any company to actually move their project. Apart from that, in your Azure, you need to have the appliance inbound and outbound ports ready. If not, you will not be able to connect to the appliance. So ports like 3389, 44368, 443, these 3 ports must be open. If not, you will not be able to connect to your appliance. So these are the requirements for VMware. And next, we'll have Hyper-V environment. So what the requirements are pretty much similar. It's just that it must be on-premise machine. The OS must be either a Linux or a Windows Server 2012 R2 or above. This is the appliance that supports it. Anything below that version, it will not be able to install the appliance. What's more, the PowerShell remoting must be enabled on each of the hosts. This is for data collections. Inbound and outbound ports are pretty much similar, 443, 44368, and a few more others that is required to be on. So the machine limit is almost the same as well, 35,000 per project. And what it will prompt you is a 12 gigabyte VHD file. So what that file is that it's a 12 GB image file that is used to spin up on the for you to run the appliance and set up. So the specs are also stated inside. As you can see, it uses at least 8 cores, 16 GB RAM, 80 GB of disk. Then apart from that is the internet access. If not, the appliance will not be able to connect to your Azure portal. All right, so moving on to the last but not least, physical servers. If you're actually looking to migrate a physical server onto Azure on the VMs, you would need to at least install the appliance in an existing server or maybe additional temporary VM that is spin up, which has the minimum specs and can be installed the appliance in. So once the appliance is installed, like the OS version must still be the same, Windows Server 2012 R2 or above. If not, the appliance cannot be installed. And for this physical server, they will prompt you another type of file, which is not the VHD, but instead a zip file. So that zip file is a PowerShell script, which requires you to actually use a PowerShell to run and install it. So I won't really go through the development part and the codings on this PowerShell, which code is it to run. You can get it from a link which I will be sharing later. It will be in a Microsoft doc. And yeah, it would still require an internet access as well. So let's move on to the tools that we have provisioned. So here you can see on the left side, I am selecting a VMware environment, which it prompts me an OVA file to actually be installed before I can actually start discovering on the servers that I have. So this OVA file inside would include the documentation that guides you to configure the Azure Migrate Appliance for a scale environment. So inside the documentation as well as the setup, it will bring you to a default configuration experience, and you would need to again configure 4 steps of prerequisites, which is to register and connect to your Azure Migrate to let it start talking and connect to each other. And as well as you must have the latest Azure updates at least, so that once it starts discovering your VMs, it would actually prompt out on the left side. Let me show you an image of that. So on the left side, I have installed the appliance, and it has started picking up on all the virtual machines and servers that I have actually installed on my on-premise. And on the right side in Azure portal, you will be able to see the discovered servers as well as in the migration tool. So I have discovered actually 36,007 virtual machines, and it showed up exactly correct numbers. So you can actually delete the virtual machines that you do not want it to discover during the setup and the discovery, so that it will not detect on what you do not want to migrate. But even though if you had discovered the VMs, there's no issue to actually select it again later to not be migrated to the Azure portal. So let me show you here. I have a 36,000 VMs right here. And what you will see is the number discovered. And the next step you will want to do is have the assessment done, since that you have already discovered all the virtual machines on your on-premise. Depending, so do note that, as I mentioned earlier on, the number of resources and virtual machines or servers that you have on your on-premise, it would take the longer the time you would take to actually discovering those servers. So for this 36,000, it took me around half an hour to actually discover this whole servers that I have on my premise. So by clicking on the access button on the left side in the middle button, you on the right side, you'll be able to see that you will need to fill in all the items as well as the project name, and select on all the VMs that you would want to migrate to, to access the VMs that you want to access. So after selecting on the VMs that you want to access and filling in all the other stuff, pretty standard stuff, here you see, hold on. Here you see on the left side, on the assessment portion, you will see that you have one assessment that's being done. And by groups, I've done on a few servers only. So moving on, if you click on to the overview, you would be able to see on whatever that you have done on your assessment, which would give you a pretty cool overview. So here it would be mainly on the centralized information which you can see. So what you see here is a monthly cost estimate on your compute servers and as well as storage. And last but not least, on the first one, where I'm pointing at is the Azure Readiness. So on the Azure Readiness, you have 4 segments. In these 4 segments, anything below the green one, I would suggest and recommend you to actually take a look at it, as it has actually something going on with the VM that might not be possible to migrate to. So first, you can see 7 VMs that I have detected are ready for Azure, and 2 is actually with conditions, meaning inside there might be some interruptions. Yep, and for those for the not ready for Azure, meaning you cannot move to Azure at all. So you would need to re-provision and reconfigure your VMs for that particular one to be able to actually get it moving to Azure. And the last one is meaning that it can't be recognized by Azure. It's an unidentified item that cannot be read or is unknown to Azure. So these 4 segments is really important. It gives you the full overview. The monthly cost, if you click in, what it will show you is that whatever that is clicked in, it would reflect on what is shown just now on the overview. Here you can see specifically on the VM readiness, the recommendation that is provided, and as well as here, it will show you on the virtual machine that I had or you have such as information such as CPU utilization, memory size that you are actually using for that particular VM, this matrix in forms of size, and maybe the throughput monthly cost estimate. So this is not the only cool thing that you actually see in Azure Migrate tool. One more cool thing that I like on this tool is that back to your home assessment tool, in your discovered servers, if you have things that is connecting to each and every one of your servers, from here, by clicking on the number, you can actually view those that is linked to your servers, and you can see the dependencies that is connected to your servers and how they are actually talking to each other. So what this allows you to do is that it makes you, it gives you the confirmation to make sure that those are also actually migrated inside Azure as well, in case if needed for the application to actually work. So if you click on the view dependencies, what they would provide you would be a even more detailed item, which is the TCP to your servers. So as you can see, my port 443, I can see all the IP addresses that is actually talking to the servers and the clients that the connections that actually connected to it. So what Microsoft has implemented to help on this is that this normally gives developers the understanding on whether give them the visibility to see what is actually connected to it and what is not, whether it is necessary to change and migrate it over to Azure. And what else that has been cool on this is that if you are not a developer, you're not a tech guy, and you will want to see an overview, but this is actually too hard to navigate around, what Microsoft has helped to implement is that it has provided they have provided users another option, which is to export an Excel file, which is more or less like a report for a better view. So next, here we go. So here is the exported Excel file that I have downloaded, and as you can see, there are that consists of 4 different tabs that is summarized on the information that you would need to review on your file. So like what you see here is the assessment summary that you have done, and you'll be able to view the total machines that you have, the cost, the disk size, when it was done on the assessment on those, the logs, and those kind of stuff. So moving on to tab 2 on the all access machines, you have each and every virtual machine that you can see on your VMs on your on-premise, and you'll be able to see the data collected issues, the recommended size that they actually recommend you to change, and the Azure Readiness, whether if it's movable or not. So as you can see, my Azure VM Readiness, everything is done except for 2 with conditions. So those 2, I would need to actually go back and reconfigure those 2. So as for the third tab, the All Access Disk, here you'll be able to switch off the disk and all the detailed estimates that's available here. So you will be able to see the source size, target size, disk card size, the cost of the disk that you're actually utilizing on. This information would actually be very, very important for any budgeting team to actually utilize on if you actually want to bring and optimize your Azure environment. So here we have the whole Excel file already. So once the assessment is done, we'll be moving on to the migration tool. Same things. So what it has is pretty similar to the assessment tool. It will have the same number of discovered servers as it's imported the information from the assessment tool to the migration tool. And you need to start replicating all your VMs to the Azure. And once replicated, it's not fully migrated yet. You can do a test migration run on each of those servers and to see if there's any interruptions or blockage that's actually preventing you to do a migration. Then once that's done, you can actually and filling in the subscription that you want to migrate into in your Azure. And there we go. That will be the whole migration process. It's pretty similar to the assessment as it's doing automatically doing the migration and assessment as you click the button. So one thing you need to take note of is that for this migration tool is that you would need to replicate, you can only replicate up to 100 VMs simultaneously. So doing this would let you shorten the time that you need to migrate, as well as ensure that everything is migrated safely. But one more recommendation is that you do so in batches. All right, so that concludes the whole migration process in Azure. So let me review that structure for you if you do not understand. Let me give you a brief understanding in terms of the architecture. So here you'll be able to see an overview structure. On the left side, you will have the on-premise, which is those that you want to migrate, and on the right side, which is the Azure Cloud. So what you need to do first for customer is to download and configure the appliance on your on-premise data centers. So depending on which environment you have, which is stated there, VMware vCenter, you will need to enable TCP number 443, and for Hyper-V host environment, you will need to enable HTTP 5985, which these ports are actually very important on the environment that you actually want to install on. So once you have fully configured and set up the appliance will be sitting on your on-premises, and you can actually start the discovery, and it will start collecting all the raw metadata, and it will start sending it over to Azure portal. So once it's sent over, you would have another visibility on your Azure portal, and you'll be able to create assessment and start replications depending on how you actually want to go through this. So which VMs you want to access and migrate, it's entirely up to you. But do note the time taken would be actually impacted depending on how many you select. So that is very important, because I understand that some of the customers and partners are actually looking for a low downtime migrations. So it's either that, or you can actually set up migration timing with the partners to actually do the migration on when you want to have it on, when can the servers be downtime on. So yep, this will be the overview on the whole setup. And moving on, we will have the migration tool overview. So just to simplify things out, to give your brain a easier understanding, there will be 2 tools that you will be using, which is the assessment tool and the migration tool. What's stated in your assessment tool will be reflected on your migration tool, And what it does is that in your migration tool, you'll be given another option to do a test run on the migration. Before you do any migrations, you will want to check on all the status of those VMs. And once that's done, you can fully migrate it into Azure Cloud and start running it for productions. So, yep, that's all I have for my slides. I hope you guys actually take the opportunity to use this very powerful tool that Microsoft has provided. Also, for this program, if you're actually looking to move to Azure Cloud, Field Data is actually offering a free assessment to help provide guidance on the tool. So you don't really have to worry if you have no experience on all this technical stuff and you would want to be guided for that. Field Data will be able to help you on those, so you don't have to worry on that. So any inquiries on the offer, you can actually reach out to them or myself. So on the slides I have, shall we proceed to the Q&A? Lilo, back to you.